on genetics. So here are the definitions for some things that we're going to talk about. I believe this is slide 6. This image may be a little bit more helpful as I go through this. So you have the cell, you have the nucleus of each cell, and it contains chromosomes. So there's the chromosome. Chromosomes are thread-like structures. They're made up of DNA. So if you pull this out, you get down in here, there's the DNA. DNA, it's the complex double helix molecule that contains the genetic information, your genes. And then genes are the units of hereditary information. They are the short segments of the DNA. So your genes are encoded on those. The point of this is, the cell is tiny, and all these little parts that go in there, your genes, these things that, can influence how you're going to develop, are very, very small, very tiny. So yes, that's why we're looking at this, these tiny, tiny little genes that can influence how you become who you are. They can also influence how old you will be, how long you'll live, or the quality of your life. Related to this, so susceptibility genes and longevity genes. Susceptibility genes are genes that make you more vulnerable to specific diseases or that can accelerate aging. And then longevity genes are things that make individuals less vulnerable to certain diseases and more likely to live to older ages. I talked about in the course introduction that I'd had my genes done through, I believe it was 23andMe, and then I put my genes through other software or other websites, I guess you would say. And so I've been able to look, and I have some susceptibility genes potentially, and then some longevity genes potentially. So here's one that I have, JAK2, twofold increased in the risk of blood cancer. They had this in, I think it was just like one study, so it's like, maybe. So anyways, but that would be a susceptibility gene. I also have this one here, FOXO3. This gene may increase lifespan. And then they have 3 or 4 different studies in different populations or different samples. So you've got, I think it was Japanese, maybe Germans, 2 or 3 other places, that the people that have this gene are more likely to live into their 90s, even their hundreds. So this is a gene I have. This would be called a longevity gene. So yeah, again, I think this gene stuff's fascinating. You have to take it with a grain of salt. And some people actually don't like knowing these things. You'll find out you have a gene, and that'll really freak some people out, even though there's like a really small chance. So it's up to you if you would like to look at it. I find it fairly interesting. Figure 2.4, 2.5, we talk a little bit about chromosome abnormalities, or the text does. It gives a nice figure for that. 2.5 gives gene-linked abnormalities. So for example, Down syndrome, this is an extra chromosome that leads to intellectual disabilities, physical or abnormalities. What's really interesting about this as far as developmental, and maybe if you were going to have kids someday, it's only 1 in about 2,000 births are potential to have someone that has Down syndrome at the age of 20. But if you have a kid when you are 45, the chances become 1 in 30. So that is a huge increase. A dramatic increase. So it's definitely something you want to think about if you're going to have kids. 1 in 300 at 35, which is, significantly higher also than 20. So yes, you can look through those if you'd like, and then like the gene-linked abnormalities, things like diabetes, sickle cell anemia, etc. So you could look through those if you'd like. Okay, so that is the genetic stuff that the book covers. On the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about the interaction between nature and nurture.